Oh, hello, welcome everyone. Just had that moment where it's 5 seconds to the stream gets started, and I have to burp. So fortunately, nothing happened there. I can't believe I'm admitting that. Welcome to this Stageworthy podcast live stream. I am Phil Rickaby. I'm the host of Stageworthy. On this live stream, we will be talking about the Toronto Fringe as it makes its return to performances after 2 years of digital productions due to the pandemic. Before we jump in, let me take care of a little bit of housekeeping. We're streaming on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook and you use the chat feature there, we will see your chat comments and I can feature some on the way. If you have questions, we can see those and we can do our best to answer them. Keep in mind, though, that although we are streaming live, there is a lag between what we say and when you hear it. So while we might not address your question or comment as soon as you post them, we do see them and we will address them as soon as we're able to. Stageworthy is a weekly podcast about Canadian theater hosted by me since 2016. My 329th episode actually comes out tomorrow. New episodes come out every Tuesday with bonus episodes now and then. Now I want to talk about my guest. Megan Mooney is a lifelong theater lover and reviewer. From BlogTO to her own online publication, Mooney on Theater, she's followed her core principles of theater criticism, which are demystify theater, enable diversity, and write with respect. Through her reviews and through Mooney on Theater, Megan has left an important and indelible mark on the Toronto theater world. Although she's recently had to put Mooney on Theater on hiatus, she still loves theater as much as she always has. And I'm just going to bring Megan in now. Hello, Megan.
Hello, hello.
Hello. All right. I'm so glad to have you here. I've always actually wanted to be able to have you on an episode of Stageworthy, so this is as good an excuse as any to have you on. One of the things that I think is a great place to start is, could you describe what Fringe means to you?
So that's a big one, actually. So Fringe has always been. So when I was running Mooney, Fringe was always our big push. Sorry, I just noticed my kids in the background waving. Okay,
that's no problem. That's no problem. I'll wave back.
Okay,
hey,
so now they're gonna go away now, though. Yes, okay. So anyway, live. Here we are. Anyway, okay. So Fringe has always been was always Mooney on Theater's big push, and part of what brought that about is because in a lot of ways, I feel like Fringe really embodies that piece about accessibility. There's the price point. That's a huge thing. Fringe is generally far more affordable than a lot of other theater ventures out there. It's, of course, gotten more expensive as time goes, but when Mooney on Theater started, it was $10 a ticket, and you could just go to anything. It didn't matter whether you knew what it was going to be. You were investing basically a small amount of time and a small amount of money in a show, and even if you hated it, you were like, it was $10 and it was an hour of my life or 45 minutes of my life. But the other thing is that you look at the audiences that were there, and a lot of the people were not your usual theater audiences. There are a lot of people, if you talk to people in lineups and stuff like that, there are a lot of people at Fringe who that's the only theater they go to. They don't go the rest of the year. And they go because Fringe is a festival. I mean, like, it is absolutely theater, but it is also a festival in the same way that people might go to a music festival but not go to other concerts during the rest of the year, because there are other things. There's the, at a music festival there's a beer tent, and at Fringe it changes names throughout time, but there's I can't even remember now off the top of my head what it's called.
Postscript.
Postscript, yes, that's it.
But for all of us, it will always be the beer
Fringe
tent.
Yeah. So there's postscript, and in fact this year there's the two, it seems. There's the main one happening at the Transact Club, and then at Daniel Spectrum there's the Postscript Lounge, which is inside, and seems to be sort of a more mellow vibe for people. And so it's a gathering space, and people meet up with other people. I remember actually being at Postscript, and it was Postscript at the time because it was when it was in that, that hockey arena thing. And there were people there who were like, "So what's this about? What is this?" And so they didn't even know it was Fringe, and so then convincing them to go to shows the next day and stuff like that. And so so there was that aspect about bringing new people into the idea of going to shows and stuff like that. So that's a big part about it. The other thing is, because it is not a juried festival, which is to say, feels like it's self-explanatory, but I have learned that nothing is actually self-explanatory. We make a lot of assumptions in this industry. We make so many assumptions. So what we mean when we say it's not a juried festival is that usually when you go to any kind of theater festival, someone or a group of people have had a bunch of plays submitted to them, and they sit down and they read them and they vet them and they decide which plays get put on. But in Fringe, it doesn't work like that. It is literally a lottery. So, excuse me, they get X number of things submitted to them, and then I was going to say draw out of a hat. They don't draw out of a hat. I'm sure it's done with like a random number generator. I can't imagine that.
Maybe it is now, but I remember the last time I was at one of the live draws, it was not a hat. There were far too many, but it was a very large bin.
Oh man.
But you mentioned the fact that, it's a lottery. I've recently spoken to several people who don't even know that, who think that it's a juried festival, and so it's just a thing that people still believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is so, and it's interesting because Toronto Fringe, not Toronto Fringe Festival, but Toronto Fringe does run a juried festival. They run it in the winter. It's called Next Stage. So Next Stage is a much smaller festival. And it is a juried festival where people can submit shows that have been in other Fringe festivals. I think they have to have been in Fringe festivals. They have to have been in other festivals for sure. And then those are juried. That's a juried thing. That's so that's a selected thing. But no, you're right. Absolutely, people don't know. The thing about something not being juried, though, and it just being a lottery, is that you don't have to have any experience to go in there and do it. So there's no gatekeeping. There's no. I don't mean that it's bad to have people out there curating our viewing experiences.
But the thing that's exciting about Fringe is the fact that absolutely anybody could find themselves in the Fringe, regardless of their level of experience. And in fact, in some ways, some really amazing things have come out of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it means that anyone who has a desire or an idea has an opportunity to get it out there. And the beautiful thing about Fringe is that as an artist, you put in your upfront costs, so you have to spend money to get in this lottery. It's I mean, I'm sure it's gone up now, but the last time I looked, it was $700 to go in the lottery. If you don't win a spot in the lottery, you get that money back. If you do win a spot, then that money goes towards the venue and the people working your show and all of that kind of stuff. You would never be able to produce a show for that kind of money. You wouldn't be able to hire, rent a space, and hire people to hang lights for you and run your lighting board and do all of that kind of stuff. But Fringe takes care of that, and so it also gives you that leg up. Plus, you're in a festival where people are already going. And the other thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is that all the money from tickets go directly to the artists. So for people who have gone to Fringe, when you're standing in line and the front of house people, just before you go in, do that little like whatever they've decided to do for their song and dance to ask you to tip the Fringe, that's because the Fringe itself needs to get money to support the organization that runs the festival. So because your actual ticket cost goes to the artists that have put on the shows. It's also why it's far more common to see Fringe shows with smaller casts, because you've got a limited audience, and you're trying to pay people from it and stuff like that. So
as a person who's done a Fringe tour, we went with, I think, like 5-person cast, and on a tour that's like almost unheard of, that many people in a show. Just before we another question that I have that's sort of related to that. One of the goals in the last, I don't know how many years of Mooney on Theater during the Fringe, was to have, this is madness as far as I'm concerned, but to have every Fringe show reviewed by the end of the first weekend.
Yeah.
So with that goal, how has that changed your relationship with the Fringe?
So it's interesting because as I was going through picking what I wanted to see, I was like only looking at stuff before the end of the first weekend.
Ooh,
And then I was
old habits.
Right? And then I was like, oh wait, I don't have to do that. I could, so that was kind of funny. It's interesting because it's interesting that you ask that, because one of the cool so there are lots of reasons why we did that, right? I mean, the biggest reason is that we want to be able to get the word out, both for the artists so that they can have their pull quotes and all that kind of stuff early on in their run, so that they can publicize it and get the word out and stuff like that, but also for our readers, because it's a short time, right? It's a short amount of time. But a thing that I hadn't thought of until we started doing that was an incredibly cool side effect of that, that I feel like is more likely to happen in a Fringe kind of setting than any other kind of setting, is that we had companies tell us that they made changes to their shows based on feedback from our reviews. And I think that's really cool, because I feel like that's a thing that feels very fringy to me, being able to pivot like that. Because the thing about Fringe is these shows they're not polished. Well, sometimes they are, but mostly these are not polished, finished product shows, right? These are works in progress.
Mhm.
And when you go to see a show at Fringe, unless it's a big touring, like, you know, international touring show, blah blah blah, then you have maybe higher expectations for its level of polish. But generally, if you go to see a show at Fringe, you sort of expect a level of, hey, I'm figuring this out, I'm developing it, I'm doing whatever to it. And it's a playing ground. It's a place where you can like figure stuff out. And so the idea that these artists can take these risks where like it's such a safe place that they can pivot mid run to be like, oh yeah, that's a really good point. I agree with that. I think I want to try changing it this way.
Yeah.
I find that amazing
Yeah.
and really exciting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before we jump into some of the details of Fringe, I am, and I think maybe some other people are curious about your story, and I'm most curious about when you started taking to theater criticism. How did reviewing theater start for you? Because I don't know if that's what you studied in school, but it's
No,
certainly the
no,
direction you went in.
I took a theater criticism course, but I didn't. It wasn't my focus. Um, Although I did really enjoy it when I took it, I was like, "Ooh, this is fun." Um, uh, it's always kind of like a little bit embarrassing to admit this, but I started doing it because I wanted free tickets. um, so when I first moved to Toronto, I started out. Maybe I should not fidget with the thing that makes noises. When I first moved to Toronto, I started volunteering at theaters because I wanted to see stuff. I didn't have money, and there are lots of different ways to um, get your theater fix for free, but they all involve, volunteering and things like that, and which was great. That was fine. But what I realized when I was doing that is that I really missed talking to people about what I'd seen, or exploring what I'd seen with people. And so I was like, nope, I need 2 tickets. I need to be able to talk to someone about this show that I've seen. Uh, so after doing a lot of volunteering at Pass Marai and Factory and some at Canadian Stage, although it's a bit more of a like intense process volunteering there. I decided to pitch to BlogTO this idea of it's always been a passion of mine, this idea of demystifying theater and this idea of like that theater is not the like intense elite thing that people think it is. And um but that said, the reviews I was reading and hearing and stuff like that were all talking about theater as though it was, right? Like they were speaking to theater. They were speaking to readers who were familiar with theater. They were speaking to readers as though they were all theater experts. And that is absolutely an audience for theater reviews. I mean, there is a readership for that. But I was like, well, that's just gonna make people are gonna read that and go, well, that's not my place then. So I had this idea that um, I wanted to write theater reviews for people who weren't those people, and so I went to the editor of BlogTO. BlogTO was a very different publication at the time, like a very different publication. So I went to the editor and I talked to him, and I was like, "Look, I want to go to small shows. I want to go to shows that are inexpensive, that are in and around the price point of a movie, and I want to talk about it in those kinds of terms. I want to present theater as a viable alternative um, to a movie. And he was like, "Oh, that's interesting. Sure, let's try it." And so I did that, and was pretty quickly was doing more and more coverage for theater there, and very quickly was the first Luminato. Uh, there was this exhibit called Mille Femmes, where I can't remember his name. I think Pierre Meravel did this exhibit where he would photograph 500 women in Toronto in the arts who were like journalists and big like influential arts people, and then those 500 women would each choose a mentee, and then they would get photographed for it. And so I got contacted by them, and they were like, "We want to include you in this, and we want to photograph you," and blah blah blah. And I was like, "Ooh, that's wow!" And I was like, my weird little column in Blog.to. And while I was there, and they were doing my makeup, I said, "So, am I allowed to ask who nominated? Like who's my mentor?" And they were like, "No, no, you're one of the first 500." And I was like, "What? No, no, what?" And there was just something about that made me go, "Well, damn. I mean, if this whatever committee this was decided that my weirdo little column was enough to get me on this first 500 list, I can do my own thing." Because as supportive as Tim was, it wasn't a theater publication, right? So I wasn't able to write as much as I wanted to about theater. I wasn't able to cover as much as I wanted to, which is fair enough. I mean, like,
Yeah.
absolutely fair enough. So I started Mooney on Theater, and I at no point did I expect that it would be that it would become a thing where I would have writers and all that kind of stuff. I would never have used my name if I wouldn't have been like Mooney on Theater and here's my team. I would never have used my name if I thought that it was, but it just grew. People were like, "Oh, this is really interesting. How would you feel about other people writing?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." Yeah. And so I was like, as long as people were clear on sticking to my values and my, and like, and not everyone was like, I mean, there were fights, and not, and here's the truth. It can be fun to be mean. Like to write mean, honestly, like, I mean, I remember one writer writing this line. Submitting a thing to be edited. And he ended the review with the line, "So finally I will say, perhaps this playwright will choose to masturbate in private in future rather than in public." Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay. So while it is sure a good line, and I get that you hated this play with every ounce of your being, this will never appear on Mooney on Theater. Never ever.
Well, one of the things that I think, like as I've read reviews over the years, one of the things that I think has often been missing is it's all well and good for a critic or reviewer to say that they didn't like something. But I'm always curious about, like, okay, so why did that not work for you?
Exactly.
This is what I want to know. I don't care that you didn't like it. What I care about is like, so and it's not constructive unless you say that. unless you are willing to say, here's why this didn't work for me, then you're just shitting on something rather than just like
Exactly.
being constructive.
Yeah. Well, the thing I always say to my writers, the thing I used to always say to my writers in training, like when not writers in training, when training my writers in training sessions, the thing I used to always say is, you could go to a production of a Doll's House that someone had switched to a one woman show that ends with her on stage naked with her hair on fire and think it's the best thing you've ever seen, and you could be raving about it. And as long as you describe those things, I will know that I would fucking hate that to my core, and you will have done a great job, because I can read that review and be like, nope, 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 nope. Because I think it's important for us to know whether or not the writer likes it or doesn't like it. I mean, I think because we need to know what's informing what they're writing. But like, in the same way that I could go to that show and review it and say those things and be like, oh my God, I hated that it ended like this. And someone else could read it and be like, but that sounds amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like,
as somebody who's traveled to a bunch of different fringes to perform, I can tell you that there are
seen
places.
That play?
Yes, likely. But also I can tell you that there are some publications that their idea of the review is to just publish a synopsis.
Yeah. No,
and you don't even get a sense of did this reviewer like it or not.
Yeah. Well, one of the sorry, just got a little anyway, one of the things that Wayne and I used to say a lot in the training was that a thing that you will often be asked when we send back feedback is, sure, but did you like it? Because they're the hardest things to write about. So the easiest reviews to write are the ones you love and the ones you hate. And the ones that you're like, meh, it's fine.
Yeah.
Are like, they're hard to write because you're just like, yeah, sure, it's fine. Because like, okay.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. Another one of our old editors, Mike, would so often he would just write something back that would just be like, did you like it?
Yeah.
And so that was a thing that Wayne and I incorporated into our training, was just telling people up front, like, you will get this comment back. You will get the comment back. Did you like it? Mm-hmm. Because it's so easy to slip into doing a synopsis. So in our training, I literally was, especially in our fringe training, and in our fringe editorial guidelines, I had a thing where you could not put a synopsis that was longer than 2 sentences because you can find synopsis. Excuse me, you can find synopsises other places. It's like, we are a web publication. This is the age of web stuff. People can find synopses in other places.
Yeah.
And that is not our job. And so if you start writing long things about what the play is about, you're going to get trapped in that. Mm-hmm. Just because it was in our editorial guidelines
doesn't always mean it was followed, but
happen.
I get it. I get that. So why don't we get into it?
For sure.
I will say, of course, this is like week 1, like not even a full week of having this. It will never again look so pristine as this.
I always get multiple copies.
Oh, you are so smart.
I don't even have a physical one yet. I haven't had time to go out and get one. I literally have printed out. I have like all these like ripped up things.
Oh, wow.
And then I have like specific show things printed out.
Well, I mean, I
And
always,
then I
I
would,
always, I always really like the physical one. Like I could look online, but there's something about
oh,
like going through the physical copy for me.
well, the thing that so here's the thing I miss, and I think I was about to say last year, because the last 2 years just don't exist. Um, so I think 2019 was the year they took it away. But do you remember that they used to have that like calendar thing where they'd have the venues and then the days or whatever
Oh
in the
man,
middle,
that was magic. That was
right?
so yeah.
Why did you take that away?
I don't know. It's one of the mysteries.
Ugh, ugh.
Um, one of the things that I'm curious about, like,
Mm.
there's for when you and I we've been going through these programs for a number of years, and there are things that make a show jump out. Like as we go
Right,
through, we talk about the shows that are sort of jumping out at us. There are things that jump out. For me, it's sometimes a title. Sometimes there is like just that perfect fringy title that you're just like,
yeah, yeah,
okay, you've got me with the title. You've got me
yeah,
with the title. And other times it's the show image,
right.
something about like the image that's published that grabs me at first. Vicky Velenosi will have pointed out that one sure way to get people to notice you is to put boobs on your
Yeah,
picture and on your poster.
yeah, for sure.
I'm sure that she would be happy that I pointed that out, but it's right there on the page, and she pointed it out herself. So those are two things that sort of jump out at me as I'm going
Right,
through. Of course, I will often also like there are shows I'm already aware of.
yeah.
Sometimes they might be shows that people I know are doing or shows that people have made me aware of. And so they're ones that I might select as well. For you, what are the things that you look at when you're choosing shows?
So this year it was very interesting scanning things this year because it made me realize how much things have changed over the years for me for Fringe from when I first started looking at fringy things. Uh, and it kind of brought me back to when I first started looking at Fringe stuff. Um, and I didn't have any context, right? Um, because I haven't been getting press releases. Well, I've been getting some like some the odd one here and there for people who have my personal email somehow jammed in their press thing. But my main press email is shut down. I mean, it's not anyway. It doesn't matter. So I haven't been getting press releases. And so it used to be that there would be things that would stand out because I had read the press release, right? And I don't have that. There are, okay, so I'm going to back up for a second. So when I just go through and I think in terms of like, as a layperson, I mean, obviously I can't look at it just as a layperson because that's impossible. But when I think of it as sort of as a layperson going through it, I'm like, I would be lost. Like so here's the thing I think a lot of people don't know about, like a lot of people not in the industry don't know about Fringe blurbs. Like 80% of those blurbs are written before the show is written. Right?
That's a fact for sure.
Yeah, right?
That's why
Like,
some of them feel so like you read them and you're like, I'm not quite sure I know what that show is.
yeah, some of them, the vast majority of them, you're like, I have no idea what this is about. Okay. I like, I remember what a eureka moment it was for me when I learned that. And I was like, oh, oh.
That's one of the reasons why, at least, like I will often like if people ask me about getting ready for Fringe, I will often tell them like decide on what your show image is way before. Because if you don't know what the show is yet, at least have a strong image. Because otherwise, like if all you've got is that blurb that you wrote like in like February or whatever,
February, yep.
then this is not like you need something that's really strong to draw somebody in.
Yeah.
So do that, front load that. Like once you've
Yeah.
got your cast, do the image, like do
Yeah.
that. Otherwise you will be lost at the last minute.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's why when I found that out is when I started publishing on Mooney. I started publishing all the press releases.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I used to, uh, which was a giant pain in the ass.
I'm
Just
sure.
just for the record, super giant pain in the ass. And I was like, why did I start doing this? This is such a giant pain in the ass. But I literally started doing it because I was so frustrated at trying to decide on shows to see based only on these little blurbs that meant
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
And so I started publishing all the press releases. And then eventually, as like things, as I became more like understanding what the website could do, and maybe we were able to do more things as time went on and stuff. I was able to like hide an index in like so they didn't go on the front page and like
Mm-hmm.
clutter everything up and all that kind of stuff. And you could just like go to a category and then you could scroll through lots of press releases and stuff like that. But that's why I started doing it, because I was so frustrated with like, what does this blurb tells me nothing. I don't know anything about this show. And so I was facing that again.
Yeah.
When I was going through when I was going through the program to prepare for this, I was like, I don't know. I don't want to go to any of these shows because I don't know what any of them are.
So what are the things that ended up being your criteria for the shows that are jumping out at you?
So, interestingly, I ended up falling back to my old criteria. So for me, but that's all inside baseball. So I'm very curious about how other people do it, because so for me, I ended up with so I ended up with 10 like absolute
Right.
things that I want to see, and the way that I choose my shows, I always go to some like shows that I don't care what they are. They just happen to fit my schedule. And I have gone to amazing shows that way that I would never have considered otherwise, but they happen to be like at the venue in between two shows, or just at the venue after a show that I'm at or something. And I'm like, okay, I'll go to this, whatever. Which is why I strongly recommend a pass, because if you don't have a pass, you're not going to do that, right? Like if you're paying full price, you're far less likely to be like, I'm just going to throw this one in on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas if you have a pass, you're going to be like, I have the space, I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And so that's how, like, I always do it with a pass. And I know people are like, oh, you were media, you got it for free. But yes, so I did get my ticket for free. But so the other thing that I did, because I am such a like fringe, sorry, I'm laughing because this sounds so like, oh, but anyway, because I'm such a fringe believer, I refuse to accept my +1. And so I would buy a pass for for anyone that I would bring with me. So I like, because I have intense philosophical objection to the idea of media getting +1
Yes.
to fringe shows.
Right.
I feel like I'm going to get a lot of media hate for this, but anyway, I feel like it is not appropriate.
Sure.
And I like, and I just
ultimately, if a person in the media getting an additional seat is a seat that is not being paid for, and when that is what is going to pay for this show ultimately, then that show needs the money from the tickets.
Yeah. And here's the thing. If it is like during the rest of the year, like a standard production, generally a company sets aside opening night to be mostly comps for media, various VIP, like media agents, other producers, like, so it's expected that night is going to be all comped. And so I don't feel bad about my +1 in that environment. And if I go on another night, and I'm gonna like take a +1, then it's usually not going to be a night. Like I wouldn't do that on a, say, Thursday or Friday night,
right?
During a regular run. I would make sure to do it on like a Wednesday or something when it's not going to be a full house. So yes, technically I am taking a seat, but I'm not really taking a seat. I'm taking a seat that would be empty anyway, right? Yes. So I don't feel bad about +1s in those situations. But in Fringe, they sell out so often.
Yes.
And so I just have a really big moral objection to media taking +1s to Fringe shows.
I get it.
I also just feel a little bit like it feels like I'm like bloodied up.
No.
Anyway, so all of this to say, I'm jiggling my thing. Anyway, all of this to say that I would buy a pass to carry with me, so that I would, because I still want to go to shows with friends, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so I would have a pass that I would take with me, and sometimes like bring friends with me. So that's why I can say get a pass, so that you can like schedule like, oh hey, look, this one's here. Let's go to this random show in between these two shows that we're going to, because it's an amazing way to discover shows.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in terms of how I chose my shows, so the first show that I saw that I was like, oh, I need to see that, was Julieta, a revenge comedy. And it's because it's Monster Theater, and Monster Theater is always great. But this is the thing, right? This is what I mean by inside baseball, right? Your average person is not going to know that Monster Theater is always great.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
I do wonder, though, if because Bruce Horak is in it, and now Bruce is in Star Trek, if that's going to up their sales at all. I'm super curious about that.
But that's kind of fascinating to be like, okay, what's the Star Trek effect on a Fringe show? Like,
right?
What is it? Yeah.
I'm super fascinated by that. Like, are people at Fringe, will they know Bruce more from Star Trek or from Assassinating Thompson?
Or will Star Trek goers find their way to a Fringe show because he's in it?
Oh.
That's also it.
Oh.
The other thing that I find interesting about Julieta Revenge story is the fact that I know Pippa Mackey is one of the people who's behind that show originally, and it's been a show that I know that she originally created for herself as one of the people in it, and it's been touring for quite a while. But what's also interesting is it's the and Juliet, because in some ways it has a very similar starting point for the musical that's about to start playing, or is playing, or will soon be playing at the Mervis Theatres before it hits Broadway from England.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting to be like, okay, they have this very similar starting point, but where will they go?
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't made that connection. That's
for me, the show, and I've been seeing the show pop up for quite a while, and it's from the title is what did it for me. The title got me.
Mhm.
And I saw it on first time I saw it on Instagram, I was like, okay, you got me. Because right away, it was Carson and Taylor promised to do a bunch of flips. I'm like,
I don't think. Oh,
okay,
Oh no, I did. Did I see
yeah.
that one?
It's
It's so
Carson.
funny that.
It's these. I don't know if they're actually going to do a bunch of flips. I don't know. If they
Okay,
do,
fair.
awesome. If they don't, I feel like they. I don't feel like they've broken their promise, because in the title, it kind of feels like they didn't say they would be successful at the flips. So
Fair,
like
fair.
I'm in just because of the title. So that's like one of those like fringe title shows that gets me right away.
So here's an interesting thing. I was going off the internet. You were going off the print one. There are several shows that have switched since the print.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So maybe.
So I'm like, is that still a show?
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, please hold.
No. We have the
I'm-
internet. We must
I
find
know.
out.
I'm very curious. Because it's not ringing super bells, but it might
They
just
are
be
there.
that
Fortunately,
one
they
did not.
are there. So I'm not gonna
Oh, okay.
after that buildup, I'm not gonna be disappointed that I don't get to see these guys promise to do a bunch of flips.
Yeah,
So
for
they are
sure.
there, fortunately.
For sure. It's funny because for me, generally, not that I don't like to laugh, but I tend to not be like really drawn to comedy and physical theater at the Fringe.
Interesting.
That said, I don't like physical theater, she says, and is like, I'm really excited about this Korean drumming.
Awesome. What's the Korean drumming one called?
It's called The Occasion.
Okay.
And it's like these traditional Korean drummers, and it just looks cool. Like, so this is interesting. So here's what I have found in my list of stuff is that for the most part, it's like all BIPOC stuff. It's like
interesting, yeah.
Which here's the thing. Here's what I love about that is that that's an option. That I've got like what did I say? 10 shows?
Yeah.
10 shows that I'm interested in, and like 8 of them. Yeah, 8 of them are like not white people. And in our theater world, for that to be a like in our like in the ecosystem of our theater world 4 years ago, that would not have been.
Well, I mean, as far as even in Fringe, like Fringe has
for sure.
for many years been a very white festival. And the effort that's being made to bring indigenous and black and people of color into the festival is pretty amazing after so long of not having many people of color at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's been a very deliberate effort. Like it's not like, oh, and this just happened.
Yeah, no. I know like, it's like the effort has been put in to make that happen, which I think is hugely important.
Absolutely. There's this one that I'm really looking forward to called I'm going to say it wrong. I'm going to say first. I'm just going to say it the way that I'm used to saying it, which is a perfect bowl of pho. But I think it's actually
pho. It's pho.
Yeah, so the perfect bowl of pho, which is a musical history of the Vietnamese diaspora. So okay, so I realize I prefaced this with saying I'm not a big comedy person, but clearly I am. Clearly I am.
You are. So many lies, Megan. So many lies.
Clearly I'm just full of shit. Really is what I'm saying.
I have to say that show is also on my list, and it might be because I also enjoy a perfect bowl of pho. But just the title. Again, the title is like,
Right?
okay,
Yeah,
I'm
no,
in.
the title's fantastic.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then there's the Don Valley Girls. Now I'm going to talk about a sketch comedy show because I hate comedy. So
Just
I hate laughing. Laughing's the
apparently
worst.
so. Yeah, it is. It's the worst. It's the
The
worst.
worst. You ask Glenn Sumi, he has never heard me laugh. Do you know the history on that? He actually tweeted about my laugh.
I think I remember that. So
um, so anyway, so the Don Valley Girls is a sketch comedy review, but it's like it's like all people who how did they say it? They said it's great. It's like we've aged out of being the main character and it kind of really sucks. So we wrote a sketch comedy show about it. Excuse me. But then it's like we're a mashup of Somali, Korean, Palestinian, Palestinian, Pakistani, Canadian perspectives from women and non-binary folks and a boy. And it's like, it's just so, I'm just like, yes, that's the comedy I want to see. So I think what I mean when I say I don't like comedy is I'm really bored of like the white boy comedy that we see all the time. So yeah, I'm super excited about that. And then there's the Moro Girl.
Mhm.
When it's Alia Saniza Razul. And my favorite part about this, I was saying this to you before we started, is that it says Moro Girl and then there's an asterisk and it says Google it. Because I don't know if this is why, but I imagine that part of why is so she is part of the Tita Collective. They did Tita Jokes, which was such a good show. And there was a rather infamous reviewer who is not known for her I don't know. I don't even know how to say what I'm trying to say. She's just like not open-minded or thinks things through. She has a very narrow view of the world and thinks that it should cater to her in many ways. And she wrote a review and she was like, in the review, she was like, I don't know what a Tita is and I can't relate to this. And and it was just like, yeah. And so
I think there may have been a few people who responded to that review with like Google is free. Which is
yeah,
again,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I have to say that when I saw the asterisk and Google it and I was like it's just like it was just such a perfect little like inside joke to the theater community.
Mhm.
Although I was talking to my friend John about it and he said it's also just a perfect way to get people, even people who don't know anything about that, it's a great way to get them engaged early on.
Absolutely. In fact, here's my favorite thing. If you go online and you look up that show, there's a link in that description that sort of like basically says, what does this mean? Or what, define the word or whatever. And you click on it, it's just going to take you to Google. So
that's
chef's
beautiful.
Kiss perfection. Yes.
Beautiful. So yeah, no, like, I mean, there's so much great stuff. And I'm really excited about it. And I haven't actually done I'm just going to play with my hair a lot. I haven't actually done my scheduling around it. And so I'm sure that I will find other stuff in there. And there's other stuff that like catches my eye and stuff. But
any of the shows that are currently on my list are basically on my list from like my first and second pass of this thing, which means that essentially all that has jumped out at me are the shows that I know and the shows with a clever title or somebody I know. Like
Yeah.
there's like little things. As time goes on, as we get closer and closer to Fringe, and this book becomes more and more abused,
Ragged.
ragged. Yes, I'm going to find other shows. One
Yeah.
that's on my list, and I know it's the episode that's coming out of this podcast tomorrow is the Garden of Allah.
Yes, it's on
And
my list too.
yeah,
It's on my
absolutely.
list too for sure.
First off, as a silent film nerd, as somebody who, because with when I was working with Keystone Theater, we were
Yeah.
like watching a lot of silent film, and the film that this play is about is a real one that you can watch, but is legendary
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
so important to the history of both silent film and queer film as a whole. So
Yeah.
such an important thing, and such and the silent film nerd in me just sort of leapt at that one.
Yeah. Also, for me, what left, I mean, that was, so for me, it didn't leap out for nerdy reasons, but for curious reasons.
Sure.
I mean, I am a giant nerd, don't get me wrong, but just not that kind of nerd. Um, but it did leap out at me because I really enjoy Andrew Lamb as a director.
Right.
And I think usually we see him doing children's theater and stuff, and so
Right.
I'm curious to see this. Um, and it's all, it's always oh, her name has just leapt out of my head.
Rebecca Perry.
Yes, it's
Yes.
always nice to see Rebecca.
Absolutely.
in stuff.
And Stephen Elliott Jackson as a playwright. He's having a moment right now between
Yeah.
this show. Here's another show in the Kids Fringe, as well as the show that I think just closed at Cahoots. So like
Right. Yeah.
he's having a moment for me,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
unusual for me. And here's one of the spots where I nerd out. I love magic. It's weird. Like it doesn't magic gets me. So at the table with Keith Brown, although I wonder about the space that it's in, because it talks about close-up magic, but he's at the Al Green Theater. So I don't know how that works. But I'm
That
kind of a
seems
sucker
really
for magic.
odd.
I know it's odd, but I'm a sucker for magic. So
Yeah, yeah.
absolutely that's kind of on my list there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it certainly looked like it would be a lot of fun.
Also, Morogoro is on there for me as well. As
Yeah.
well as there's Perfect Bowl of Pho. I have to say, Laura Pitchinen's Let's Be Honest, I think she was actually supposed to do that at the Fringe in 2020. And I
Right.
think it's important to note that a lot of the shows that are
I was gonna
appearing at
say, I
this
think
year's
a lot.
Fringe are shows that were supposed to appear for us in 2020. And
Yeah.
so these are shows that have finally, after 2 years, had the chance to go on and to go on stage.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious to know if that is going to make them better or worse than they would have been. Right?
That's an interesting question.
Because on the one hand, you could be like, oh, so they've had all this time to workshop them and da-da-da.
Yeah.
But like, really, do we think that's what happened?
I mean, here's the thing is in a lot of cases it's possible that did happen and that could have happened. But I know for myself, as a creative person, as a creator, there were periods of time during the pandemic where I could do nothing creative.
Oh.
So there's like that.
I mean,
is perfectly
there were
valid.
periods where I could do nothing. Screw creative. Like I'm like, I guess I can get out of bed.
Yes, absolutely.
Like
absolutely. Just because we're starting to go over our time here, but
okay.
I did want to get your take, because I for one am happy about the COVID protocols that we are having at the Fringe this year, that the staff and volunteers are vaccinated, and that masks are going to be required in the venues. And one of the reasons why I'm super stoked about that and why I think it's so important is most of these venues are quite small and intimate.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that's been striking me as the theaters have been opening is the reminder that every performer who gets on a stage is putting their physical self on the line just by getting on the stage, that they could get sick, they could like and have to miss shows. It's happened so often.
Yeah.
So each of the performers in these very intimate stages is risking a lot just by being there. And so I think it's super important that this is something that the Fringe is committed to this year.
I was actually, honestly, I was surprised that they weren't requiring people to be vaccinated, because the theaters, like when you go to a show, like if you go to a show at Factory right now, you have to show proof of vaccination.
Do you still? Because I think there are a lot of the shows are not doing that so much anymore because the requirement lifted. Some of them held it out for quite a while, but a lot of them have lifted and they're still requiring masks, except maybe the Mervishes who are making it optional as of July the 1st.
Well, when I went to Among Men, you needed to show, but that was before the thing lifted, the mask thing lifted.
I think a lot of the theaters were holding on to the vaccination requirement because the assumption was people who bought their tickets were buying their tickets with that assumption. And so that's why they kept that. But for Fringe, I'm happy enough with masking, just because as somebody who's going to be performing in a Fringe festival later this year, I worry about like traveling. And so I think about all the people who are touring and things like that as well. So anything that we're doing to keep the performers safe is good by me.
Well, and if you read the thing, all the performers have to have been vaccinated. Right, so all performers, all volunteers, all of that, those people have to have been vaccinated.
Yeah.
And I do understand why, even if the vaccination stuff hasn't been lifted from other theaters, I do understand why Fringe would have lifted it if they did, because that is a lot to ask volunteers to police, because it is a thing that people get so awful about, right? And so I think that you would run the risk of people getting, potentially even violent, frankly.
Yeah, I think mostly just like even the verbal abuse is the problem, because that's something that people who are being paid to be ushers for are having to deal with, and it's not something that like the volunteers should have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that it's I'm glad I was certainly glad to see that masking was still in place, though. Absolutely. And I agree with you. I think that we need to respect these artists are in this space, and they don't have the option of like stepping back and being away and all that stuff. Like, we're making an educated choice of whether or not we're comfortable being in that small space with all these people. And it's Fringe. They're not going to be able to distance people. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was
no,
just
go
gonna
ahead.
say,
No, please go ahead. Yeah.
I know that I'm certainly, anything I go to, I'm going to be there with my like very tightly fitting N95.
Same.
Mega hoo-ah thing. Yeah.
Do you have any final thoughts before we close off? Any shows that you wanted to make sure that you mentioned, or any thoughts that you had about Fringe?
No, I think I mentioned all my shows. I do think one thing I did want to mention was about Kids Fringe. Something that I wanted to look into Kids Fringe, and I did, about so it's at St. Vlad's, right, this year, and St. Vlad's is freezing.
Yes.
So if you're taking your kids there, know that, bring a little sweater, but also know that it's temporary. I didn't realize that, but I looked it up, and it's temporary. So it's not that they have moved it there for good. It says it's temporarily at St. Vlad's.
Yeah, I think like last time I walked past I don't remember which theater it's normally at.
I was trying to remember the name of it too. I can't remember. It's the one. It's the U of T one.
Yeah.
It's on that.
And I think they're doing some serious construction there. which
Well,
is
that's
similar
what.
to why we don't have Theater Pass Marai this year, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's construction everywhere. There's construction
I mean,
everywhere.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say also, like, everything is sort of, we're building things up slowly again
Yeah.
this year, right? Like, we've been away for 2 years, and so I think it's going to be about being patient
Yeah.
and getting back into the groove of things. And I think Fringe, Fringe staff have been working their butts off to
Yes,
make this
absolutely.
happen and to keep things going uh like, I mean, honestly, the fact that we have a festival happening, I think, is amazing,
Absolutely.
because we didn't know what was going to be happening right
Yeah.
now. And they've gone through a couple years of uncertainty, and we're still here, it's still happening. We managed
Yeah.
to have these virtual festivals. And I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for the amazing work that they've done. And I'm curious to see what will happen with this sort of, with a hub in the east as well as a hub in the west.
That's interesting
um
to me as well, because there are more Eastern venues this year, which is interesting because having traveled to other fringes, there are fringes that are very localized.
yeah,
Winnipeg and Edmonton are very localized within a specific
right.
area. And that is one of the selling points of those fringes. Like, you could
Hmm.
walk from one venue to another in
Yeah,
20 minutes to 30, 20 to 30 minutes.
yeah,
Once we start spreading them out, then it starts to become it's more of a chore to get from place to place. But it's interesting to start seeing like an Eastern hub growing
yeah,
in the East End. So that's fascinating.
yeah. I mean, so I live in Cabbagetown. I mean, sort of Cabbagetown-ish. I live in Cabbagetown-ish. And so I like the idea of an Eastern hub.
Yeah,
And um I mean, I know that, even in the past, when things were based in the west, like, I would, like, it's not like Tarragon is super close
no,
to, like, Pass Marai,
no,
you know?
I've done that walk. I've done the
Yeah.
walk
Oh,
because
me
you're
too.
just like you're motoring, because do you risk the TTC or what? But
Right.
you
Exactly.
do that power walk, and you're like, have I timed this correctly? And you
Yeah.
do that last scramble as you see your audience running in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I honestly do my scheduling based around venue stuff anyway.
Yes. I
So
mean, you kind of have to. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, I can totally see myself scheduling an East day
Yeah.
and a West day, and
Yeah.
like, doing it that way. And I mean, just to, like, bring it back to that thing, like, I can see that being uh the kind of thing where then I throw in, like, a
Yeah.
mystery
The show
show
you
for
didn't
myself.
expect. Yeah. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Those are great.
Which might be awful. It's like, what I used to always say is, Fringe can be the Russian roulette of theater.
It is
Like,
the Russian roulette of theater. I mean, this is rude and not meant necessarily fair, but people who are not familiar, I'll often say it's a crapshoot. Like, almost literally, you
yeah.
don't know.
Oh,
You
oh,
don't know.
I remember going to a show. I was reviewing. This was when I was with BlogTO, going to a show that I was reviewing it, so I couldn't leave. I couldn't, like, there was just, I couldn't. And I'm not someone who leaves a show easily, but I would have left this one. Uh, and I was like,
Yeah.
I was sitting there and I wanted to gouge my eyeballs out. But, but